Okay, I think we've got everyone, so we can go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Okay, I think, why don't you call the roll, I guess, is first.
All right. Commissioner Isaac,
Here.
Commissioner Westerberg,
Here.
and Chair Lindwall.
Here.
All right, we've got a quorum.
Okay, I think the next thing we need is a motion to suspend the rules to allow this meeting to be conducted via Zoom.
So moved.
Second?
I second.
All
Okay,
right. Commissioner Isaac,
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg,
Yes.
Chair Lindwall.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, next on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from February 24th. I have some edits to suggest, so I guess that comes first, and then we motion to approve. Am I getting this right, Megan?
We can
Do the motion first.
Yeah, you can make a motion and then
Okay,
approve it.
all right. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move that we approve the meeting minutes from April 4th. I'm sorry, from February 24th, 2021.
I'll second. And then I'd like to go through my changes. Most of them are pretty minor edit things, but there are a couple of substantive pieces. On the third paragraph on page 2, I think Commissioner Isaac then asked how these tie into the building code. That's just a grammatical thing. But on page 4 of the minutes in the third full paragraph, where Commissioner Isaac and I were kind of having a discussion about, Commissioner Isaac then inquired what the benefit is of having the definition of family within the code. And then it probably should be Lindwall responded that it goes back to the comprehensive plan, which describes the construct of what a neighborhood is, just to clarify who was saying what. And then I think that's, oh, and then on page 6 of the minutes, the next to the last full paragraph, with Commissioner was stating that there are approximately, I think it's 25 transfer stamp applications per week, was what that was referring to. Just for clarity for those who are going to read these in the future. And I think that's it.
I will second Commissioner Lindwall's motion on those edits.
Okay. So, Commissioner Isaac,
And are we voting on the amendment or on
as
everything?
amended.
Everything as amended? Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg,
Yes.
Chair Lindwall.
Yes.
Okay, those pass.
All right. Megan, would you like to kind of kick us off as to where we are with this process
Sure.
and kind of what the staff memo includes?
Let me share. All right, is everyone able to see?
Mhm.
Okay. So for a little bit of background, in case people have not been following along, This text amendment is coming about from an aldermanic referral that was made in September of 2020, excuse me, to the Plan Commission to discuss and consider modifications of the zoning ordinance to change occupancy of dwelling units and the definition of family. So our initial staff recommendations included exploring the use of occupancy standards from the Building or Property Maintenance Code for owner occupied and rental dwellings, consideration of an option to limit the maximum occupancy of all dwelling units regardless of size to no more than 8 occupants, whether related or unrelated. Any dwelling proposed for more than 8 occupants would then have to apply for a special use as a rooming house, and this would apply in all zoning districts. And then consideration of eliminating any reference to family in the zoning regulations for the occupancy of dwelling units within the entire zoning ordinance. We initially brought these items to the Plan Commission on November 11th of last year for discussion. That discussion began and the commission voted to send this to the zoning committee for further review. This was at the February 24th zoning committee meeting. And some of those discussion points included the purpose and benefits of retaining the family definition in occupancy standards. Specifically, this was whether keeping or removing the family definition would help with occupancy enforcement and the broader goal of providing safe and affordable housing options for residents, as well as the impact on residents with different cultural backgrounds, Northwestern University students living off campus, and members of other protected classes, including those living in shared housing. We also discussed the benefits and challenges of applying occupancy rules across both owner-occupied and rental units. So there was a suggestion to have square footage basis for occupancy within the staff memo. Reference the property standards way of figuring out the maximum occupancy. So this deals with the square footage that is within a bedroom as well as shared living space. And that helps to essentially create a formula of sorts for how many people can actually live within a particular dwelling unit. We do have Angelique Schnarr here. I think she may be able to provide a little bit more feedback on that if there are any questions. In order to do this, we would have landlords submit floor plans when they were applying for a rental license and have floor plans for owner-occupied units be submitted at the time of a transfer stamp request. So the maximum occupancy could then be determined at those times, and the maximum occupancy load would be provided to owners of rental and owner-occupied units. We also discussed increasing the maximum number of unrelated people who can live within a dwelling unit. We also discussed how to enforce new or existing regulations, as well as address student nuisances. This is a major part of the discussion. Some thoughts that came up included creating agreements within adjudication if there are some violations that were given, and determination of liability found in the hearing to the renter units, as well as owner-occupied enforcement usually being done on a complaint basis. And finally, there was consideration of whether or not the zoning code is the best place to have and address occupancy standards or control human behavior. Generally, the zoning code regulates land use and deals more so with the built environment, not so much an individual person's behavior within that built environment. So this evening, we really want to get some additional discussion on that and begin to put some of the discussion items into some type of language that we could bring to the Greater Commission to discuss further. I do want to make sure that it's clear that the zoning committee is the subcommittee to the Plan Commission, which would be the recommending body to the Planning and Development Committee and the City Council. So this is not the last stop prior to this going to City Council for a vote. This would be going to the Plan Commission for additional discussion, likely multiple meetings, and then the Plan Commission would make a recommendation once we've kind of massaged some language a little bit more and figured out how we want to go about this. And then it would go to Planning and Development Committee, then City Council. So there are more opportunities to discuss what is on the table this evening.
Okay, thank you. I'm Jean Lindwall, chair of the committee and a member of the Plan Commission. And I want to kind of take this initial opportunity to let everyone know that because there is a commission meeting that is going to start at 6 p.m., there's really kind of limited time for discussion at the committee this evening. So I suspect if there are multiple people who want to be involved and talk speak to this issue, we may need to have a subsequent subcommittee meeting or committee meeting. So I want to make it clear that we are still kind of in the discussion stages of the process. I think the first thing I'd like to do before we listen to the, hear from the public, I'd like to see if the commissioners have any questions for staff concerning the staff memo that was put together. So Commissioners Isaac and or Westerberg. Any comments?
One question for staff. When we started this discussion initially, it was about some archaic language in the code that referred to things like servants and other terms that no longer were relevant or made much sense. And then we got into the idea that it was difficult to enforce regulations because of the nature of trying to define what a family is and how the zoning code used that term. We now seem to be, based on some of the memos that are coming out, looking also at this idea that we should change the language because it will help us improve affordable housing in the city. So those are all good goals. I guess my question is, what are we really trying to accomplish with this? Is there one major accomplishment we need to perform here? It seems to me the concerns keep growing wider and wider, and that's a little difficult to try to pinpoint exactly what the changes should be. And I'm hoping we can get a little bit more of a guidance from the staff on that.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I can start off, and then if Sarah or Angelique have additional comments, they can definitely do that. I think with a text amendment such as this, there are a number of different things that we want to look at. It's definitely getting rid of some archaic language. And some of that is very simple to do with regards to taking out language that mentions servants or things like that. But that also can lend itself to changing some of the language with regards to family, since there are different considerations for what a family is, and that has changed over time. So it's taking a look at how we determine things like that. If we need to change the definition for that to be more broad or and not quite as specific as what we have now. And then also with regards to that, there is the enforcement piece. And as Angelique can probably attest, it's difficult to enforce some of the occupancy standards as they are now without getting some very personal documentation at times. So it's some of that is the enforcement issue, dealing with some of the nuisances, which is not really a zoning issue, so to speak. So we need to speak to how we go about addressing those issues and enforcing rules and regulations that we already have on the books. I think overall the goal is to have housing that is affordable for Evanston residents, as well as make sure that with the enforcement of our existing nuisance regulations that we make sure that we don't create areas that are full of these nuisances, and that we can make sure that Evanston is livable for everyone. There are a number of different things that speak to equity and diversity as well. So it is a fairly broad goal. I think with this type of text amendment, it kind of ends up being that just the pure nature of things and the regulations that we're proposing, or really that other municipalities or states or forms of government have started to undertake as well. And so it admittedly is fairly broad, but we do want to address multiple things. So apologies if that hasn't been clear in the beginning, but there are a number of different things that we want to accomplish in this particular.
If I can add to that, one of the things that our occupancy standards we're trying to do is regulate behavior based on relationships of human people that are allowed to, human beings who are allowed to live in a dwelling unit together. And I'm going to use a sort of parallel example of something that is similar that we run into. One of the things that we sometimes have difficulty with are things like panhandling. And what happens is people say, well, we have to get rid of the homeless people who are downtown panhandling. And in many cases, it isn't, the people who are panhandling may not be homeless, but the association is with it. I think we have an association with nuisance properties or students in particular not behaving the way neighbors may want. And that is associated with overcrowding of the housing as opposed to behavior of people, whether or not they're related or even living together. Because one of the things we haven't gotten a great deal of feedback from, but one of the things we've done is we've sent a questionnaire out to the property standards officials in Illinois to find out what types of things they deal with, what kind of occupancy codes they uphold. And one of the questions we asked is, when you get somebody complaining of over occupancy, what other are the things that you see? What are the factors? And most of the time it's things like parking and noise and things like that. So it may not even be who is living there at the time. So we really need to look at what we're trying to do with what code and apply the appropriate code and the appropriate methodology to addressing problems. If our occupancy code is designed to allow, really to make our housing safe for the people living in it, arguably it really isn't a thing of, the relationship of the people living in that is not going to determine the safety. Witness how, even though our zoning doesn't say, our occupancy doesn't say it is only for rental, we apply it really only for rental. We only deal with ownership when there's a complaint. And so, you could have somebody who owns a house and can pack as many related people in as they want to, as long as they behave and nobody gets upset about them. Are we creating unsafe conditions? Maybe we are. So I think we have to really look at what we're trying to accomplish with what code. And I also believe that a very important thing we have to look at is what systemic barriers in our code, whether it's our zoning code or other code, exists that specifically is to the disadvantage of certain groups, whether they're officially protected classes or just groups that end up being disparately affected in a negative way by that code.
Thank you. Commissioner Isaac, do you have any questions? before I move on to mine?
No, I don't have any questions from the staff report.
Okay, I do. I was, and we discussed this at our last meeting about, what the square foot occupancy is, and it's included, it's 70 square feet required per bedroom for a bedroom for one person, or 100 square feet in a bedroom for two people, plus 50 square feet of common area, living space. I'd just like to confirm with staff that my math would be correct, but assuming there's a 5-bedroom house with each bedroom that has 100 square feet, would it be safe to, would having 10 people living in that 5-bedroom house violate our property standards code, assuming we've got an extra 250 or 500 square feet of common area, which is essentially a 20 by 25 foot area, common area. Am I interpreting the code correctly? Maybe Angelique?
I can answer that for you. So the code requires 70 square feet in a bedroom for one person and 50 square feet in a bedroom for each person for 2 or more people. So if it's 100 square feet in the bedroom, it's 2 people. If it's 150 square feet in the bedroom, it's 3 people. So when we determine the occupant load, the very first thing we do is calculate how many people can live in the house based on the square footage of the sleeping rooms. Then we have to look at common space. In a building that is supposed to be occupied for 3 to 5 people, we require 120 square feet of living room space and 80 square feet of dining room space, or a combined square footage of 200 square feet. So if we have a house with 5 bedrooms and each of those bedrooms is big enough for 2 people, but say we only have 150 square feet of common space, then you have to revert back down to what that maximum occupant load is. So even though the bedrooms say 10, the combined living space wouldn't allow for 10 people. So we may have to back down the occupancy based on the combined space.
Okay.
If there's 150 square feet in the living room and 100 square feet in the dining room, or 250 square feet combined, then that would be for an occupant load of 6 or more. So then if we have 250 combined, then you would utilize only the sleeping rooms to calculate occupancy. But it has to be a legitimate sleeping room. I mean, it has to meet proper egress. It has to have, all of the requirements for sleeping room, accessibility and all of that. You can't just randomly turn a back porch into a sleeping room and call it a legal sleeping room. So it has to meet all of the other requirements for habitable space.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yes.
One other thing, a bedroom, it can't be officially a bedroom if somebody has to go through it to get to another room. So, I mean, they're really, it's pretty detailed.
Yes.
Yes, but I think my point is that, if you've got reasonably good sized bedrooms, each of those bedrooms could conceivably, accommodate 2 or more people, which would increase, the maximum allowed in say a rental, single family rental house considerably, or even just a multi unit rental building, depending on the number of bedrooms. Okay, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I would actually like to suggest an alternate to either, to what's been suggested so far, either eliminating the family definition or going to a square foot occupancy requirement. In part because I don't think that trying to do that calculation for all of the residential units in Evanston is really feasible. I also think that strictly going by the minimum code requirements for occupancy, I don't think gets at the issues that we're trying to address. Similarly, I recognize the issues with that staff has now in trying to enforce the codes there and the occupancy limits that are on file. So, and just kind of for the benefit of the members of the public that are on the call, at the Plan Commission meeting, we're going to be considering creation of what's called an administrative review use. This is really intended, it was suggested in order to deal with some of the, make it easier for some of the vacant spaces in downtown and other business districts to operate or to be approved. Because right now in our zoning code, there's are what's called permitted uses, which anyone is allowed to, they can happen without special approval. And then we have uses that are called special uses that involve, in the downtown, it would be things like fast casual restaurants, indoor fitness centers. In residential neighborhoods, it's they'd be uses like daycare centers that require both staff review. It requires hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeals, approval by the City Council. So the suggestion is that for a specific set of uses that are routinely, the city routinely approves with a general set of conditions, that approval process should be handled administratively. So my suggestion with respect to the definition of family would be to add a provision to the occupancy section. And I'll kind of read what I've drafted, and I'm certainly open to suggestions. Staff is much better at this than I am. But it would read, occupancy, and the premise would be you'd retain the definition of family, updated, but generally as it currently exists, with kind of a nuclear kind of family, married or unmarried, but with kids, and 3 unrelated people would be a family. But here's what I would suggest. A provision that says occupancy of a dwelling unit that does not meet the definition of family is a non-family household subject to the standards and conditions established in the administrative review use provisions for a non-family household. So a non-family household is anything that doesn't meet the definition of family. And I think what this would accomplish are the following. It would provide some flexibility as new kinds of households evolve. It would provide a mechanism for addressing the occupancy issues kind of up front, rather than in a response to code enforcement activities. It would apply equally to rental and owner-occupied units. And just kind of by way of example, it could apply to both a situation where 5 or 6 unrelated adults, probably students, want to live together in a larger single-family house, or it could also apply in the case of, say, 5 seniors that want to live together in a home that is owned by one of the seniors. And I think it could also be a matter of shifting the burden of who has to figure out whether or not it's a family by requiring the owner who wants to either lease to a group of more than 3 unrelated people to address, to provide the evidence that the occupants of the unit are in fact, or do in fact meet the definition of a family. And I think that, in terms of the standards and conditions, you'd want to address, what the maximum occupancy should be. And it may be, particularly in single family neighborhoods, you may want to say, it's 1 person per legal bedroom, for example. So I think the standards can vary from what's in the code, the property standards and building codes. I think it also would allow you to, I think that before you offer or provided the certificate approving this use, you'd want to make sure that the property's been inspected. So you get the code enforcement issues taken care of, and maybe establish a regular inspection schedule for the units, going right to the life safety issues. I would assume you could require that the names of all of the occupants be on the lease. And it would be an opportunity to address, parking, the trash management plan, the other kinds of property standards that are common. And also, I don't know if this could be done. My guess is there would be, it would require discussion with the law department, but maybe establishing some type of affordability requirements. But at a minimum, I would think that you'd want to know what the rents, for the units are, so that as the discussions about affordable housing continue, that you have some data, so it's not just all anecdotal about, how much investors are charging to rent to groups of students. So that's my thought. So I think at this point, I'd like to see what other commissioners think, and maybe, initial reactions from staff. But that's an option that's not been on the table that I would suggest maybe we consider pursuing.
So right off the bat, I would say that it sounds like there would be a lot of work, not only for staff, but it sounds like it would delay a rental process, because it and I haven't been in the rental market in a while, but you make an application, within a day or two, there's a background check done, and then you're signing a lease, and you're potentially moving in, within a week or two of that. Sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more, but is your suggestion that let's just say it's a four bedroom unit, would the owner have to go and get the certification every year?
Not necessarily. I mean, right now, if you've got a 4-bedroom unit, a landlord can rent to a family with a couple of kids now.
Yes.
Without, and not be in any violation of anything. It's only really a matter of if he's chosen to, or she is chosen to rent to 4 Northwestern students, for example, or other unrelated individuals, then obviously they are in violation of what our current definition of family is. And, I think it could happen. I don't know that it necessarily has to happen before. I mean, it could be.
But I mean, if you don't do it before, then you run the risk of signing a lease, moving in, and then potentially not being granted that right? And then so now the landlord's stuck. The city's going to say, landlord, you have to get rid of these tenants. They can't stay there. Tenants are going to say, well, we just signed a lease, we moved in, like, where are we going to go? We spent all this money. And I think what your suggestion doesn't address is, why do we need the definition of family to be, or like, why does there have to be a restriction or any kind of prohibition on 3 unrelated people living in a dwelling unit?
There's not. I mean, I would still keep the 3 unrelated.
But my question is why? Why keep it is the question.
Because if you eliminate it, you conceivably, and you go with the property standards definition, then you conceivably run into the issue of 6 or 8 or 10 people living in even a 4, probably a 4-bedroom apartment. And is that desirable in terms of neighborhood character?
So I like the idea of having something that's streamlined, that's simpler to address. Um, I I don't think that the relationship of the people living in the dwelling unit is really and this is my opinion. I don't think it matters. I don't think it should matter to the city, right? I mean, whether Northwestern was here and or not, right? Like I don't necessarily care that that's an issue in that area. I'm talking about the city as a whole. The city shouldn't care who's living in a house. We're looking at zoning, and we're looking at property standards, right? So, like the relationship of those people to each other doesn't matter in those two, like in those arenas. If we were to have something that said, if you're like number one, you need to have this many square feet in order to, properly occupy this unit, which it sounds like that's already somewhere else in the code. But if you were to have an administrative review process for any time you were going to have more than 6 people or more than 8 people, right? Like find out what's the average number of people, and say pick a number higher than that and say, okay, then if you're going to sign a lease that's going to have more than 8 people living in there, or if you're going to occupy a home and have more than 8 people in there, you have to go and get it confirmed by the city, right? And it makes it puts the onus on the occupant, and if necessary to inform tenants, the city council can amend the summary to the Evanston RLTO ordinance that makes it clear to a prospective tenant that, hey, if you're renting a place that's going to have more than this number of people, that one of the things your landlord should be providing you is with this certification that it's allowed.
I think that my thought is that, I mean, we know that there are examples all over town of landlords who know that our definition of family says no more than 3 unrelated people. And they've chosen to rent to larger groups. And right now, as staff has explained, you've got landlords that are playing games, telling kids to hide the mattress, or we'll move the mattress out, and so I think there's an enforcement issue now. And I think that going with some sort of an administrative use review would allow staff, it would put the onus on the landlord and the tenants to say, yes, we meet the definition. I think it would be easier to I think it would be easier to enforce after the fact.
But I don't see how your suggestion changes anything, right? So a landlord or tenants that want to skirt those rules are still going to skirt those rules no matter what they say, right?
Sure. And they're probably going to skirt the square foot occupancy rules as well.
They absolutely might. So trying, I mean, while a noble effort to try and stop people from skirting those rules, I think the first place we should be looking is making sure that our rules are what we want them to be, not making them so we can, we're not even trapping the people that want to break the rules. Like, I don't think any of our suggestions really are, except for a database, right? And even then, with a database that's maintained by the property standards division, you still don't know how many people are actually living in a unit until you actually go in there, right? I mean, these enforcement issues, I don't think are going to be solved by us. And so I would say that, like, looking at our rules, and one of them being the 3 unrelated persons rule, and deciding whether that makes sense to still keep in place is where we should really be looking. And enforcement, I think that's beyond us. And I don't know that we are not gonna, in the zoning committee of the plan commission, we're not gonna solve enforcement.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Chris?
No, I would agree with that. But, I do think one of the issues, I would agree that the city probably should not necessarily want to care about the relationship of people who are living together. It's not necessarily the city's business. But you could argue it is sometimes a neighborhood's business to know who's living in the neighborhood. And the idea that, investors can snap up houses and begin to rent to 4, 5, 6 unrelated people. I think we have to recognize that can change the nature of a neighborhood or a community over time. Now, maybe that's inevitable, and maybe it wouldn't be such a horrible thing, but I think we have to acknowledge that those kinds of situations can change. When you have investors able to buy into neighborhoods, it does tend to change what's going on in the neighborhood, and it's something I think we just have to consider with whatever situation we end up endorsing here.
Okay. It's now almost 5:45. The commission has a meeting at 6, and I know I've got several people signed up to speak, and then we're gonna, as a committee, need a few minutes to figure out our next steps. So I'm gonna call the 5 names I've got on the list, and ask if you can kind of just keep your comments to a minute. And then one of the things that I think that the committee needs to do is to schedule a follow-up meeting so that we can continue the discussion and dialogue. So if that's all right with the rest of the commission staff?
Yeah.
Okay, first name is Gail Lobin.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Gail Lobin at 2030 Orrington Avenue. My comments to 1 minute will be to put a big pause on this. I feel like I entered the middle of a movie with the technical nature in which staff and members of the committee are speaking. I catch some of it, I don't catch some of it. I strongly encourage a big pause for some education around this. As people pointed out, it impacts different areas of Evanston differently. I would argue that that the first ward may bear some of that from a disproportionate level, given our proximity to the university. And very briefly, for people who are not aware of this on the call, one of the instances that was just raised was, you could have a rental happen in your neighborhood, and is it a neighborhood concern? We had an exchange, a house that was sold next to us, and there are now 6 bedrooms, 2 added without a permit, by the way, which the city, given aldermanic intervention, has put a stop construction on, and it's now being advertised on various platforms for a 6-bedroom rental. And I have absolutely no control over this as a homeowner. And I just, before we start defining definitions of families and everything else, like, we would love to have a family next door. Unfortunately, I think we're going to end up with 6 unrelated students. So I really ask respectfully, how can we have a discussion to bring some of us up to speed on how we got here, other than it was an aldermanic question in September of 2020, and how do we become more educated to look at this from broader perspectives and learn along the way? Because I'm, again, feel like I came into something that is well on its way to happening without knowing enough about it, and not having various learning from others what's happening to them and having our considerations in the first ward raised. Thank you.
And then I've got Sabrina Redmond. She on the call? Don't see her.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sabrina Redmond. I'm the Youth Program Manager with Connections for the Homeless in Evanston, Illinois. I would absolutely love to be a part of a part 2 conversation of this because I have a lot to say. But due to time and out of respect, I'm just going to read the statement that I have prepared with the hopes of, you know, there being follow-up after this. So
real quick, I hope.
I hope.
We have 12 minutes until our next meeting.
Okay, I'll be real quick. As mentioned in the letter you were provided from our Executive Director, Betty Bogg, our program, Our House, currently houses 6 young people in a 2-flat that could easily house 9 people were it not for the 3 unrelated rule in the City of Evanston zoning code. Additionally, many of the other young people we support through our program share housing because that is the only way they can afford to live. We have a wait list of over 80 young adults who are currently homeless and living in toxic environments. Some of those being in abandoned buildings, cars, alleyways. On a daily basis, we receive referrals and phone calls of homeless young adults in Evanston. And honestly, it breaks my heart to have to turn them away because we're at full capacity. And knowing that we have the opportunity to have more spaces available to house these young people that are homeless. So we need the 3 unrelated rules to be repealed so that we can take these young people into our house and get them on their way to realizing their full potential as adults in our community.
Okay, I have a quick question for you, and you don't have to answer it now because we've got to move on, but
I know.
Is there a reason why you're not taking advantage of the group home provisions in the zoning code, which would allow 4 to, as a permitted use, which would allow 4 to 8 people living?
So at our house, we're informed that the max is 6. Sue, I know Sue is on this call. If you have different information, you can chime in as well.
But I would encourage you to investigate that as an alternative.
Okay.
Yeah, we can look at
Okay.
that.
We can
Next,
look into that.
Bonnie Wilson. You on?
I'm here, if I can take off the video. Sorry. Yes, I timed my speech. I'm Bonnie Wilson. I've lived in Evanston for 48 years. I've been a real estate agent for over 35 of those years. I'm a member of the Government Committee of the North Shore Barrington Association of Realtors. This committee spoke at several Evanston City Council meetings against, quote, the brothel law and definition of family in 2011, 2012, and again in 2013. As a real estate agent, a member of the NASBAR Government Committee and Joining Forces for Affordable Housing Committee, I would like to make the following statement against the city's definition of family. The only appropriate way to proceed is for the city to have identical standards for people regardless of their relationship. It is not appropriate for the city to continuing questioning the bloodlines of residents that wish to share a living space together. NASBAR made the similar statement to the Evanston City Council in the May of 2013 and is still appropriate now. The time is now that the Evanston definition of family and the ordinance of 3 unrelated people be stricken from the city ordinance and not wait another 10 years to have this discussion again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. Diana Wanatrans, right? I'm sorry if I butchered your last name.
Hi, no problem. I'm Diana Yantarans. I'm a member of Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. I'm a resident of the 9th Ward at 848 Ridge Avenue. And incidentally, this is a 3-flat. And I help manage this 3-flat, which is owned by family, and for many years had Northwestern students living here. My statement's very short. The pandemic has caused Evanston to face a tight budget situation with few sources of new revenue on the horizon. At the same time, the country is facing the most serious housing crisis since the Great Depression, and our town is no exception. It's time to get creative about ways to create affordable living situations for people that use the city's limited resources efficiently. This zoning change does not cost anything and is one way to increase affordability without further straining the city's budget. Thank you.
Next up is Cecile. McHugh, if you're on the call.
Sorry for the delay. Hi. I will go as fast as I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm a little distracted here by family. I want to say that I agree completely with Gail Lobin about a pause for education and discussion involving public discussion and communication, because this one-way discussion really doesn't work. But I'm going to go as fast as I can through my thoughts. Isn't the intention behind the use of family in these discussions that within a family, there are often small children who could easily share bedrooms, one of cars, and a family provides some protection against noise and other nuisances. And a family must be allowed to grow as large as they do grow without being prevented, without requiring them to move, or of course that's ridiculous. And then a group of unrelated people would be adults, should and can be limited in number, and certainly parking places could be limited, which would reduce traffic at the same time. Two big issues with allowing lots more people to live in a house or parking and traffic. People keep struggling with the term family. Let's just change it to something appropriate. Call them households. A household can be a family. X number of unrelated people without a special use or license. Y number of unrelated people with a special use or license. And what I really came to talk about is lodging establishments. I don't often attend these meetings due to time constraints, but what exists in the zoning requirements are lodging establishments. Sounds archaic, but we have one on our house. It's extremely well run. It's been there for 50 years. I think many of you are familiar with it. Absolutely no trouble. 9 bedrooms, and I think it houses at times maybe 9, at times 6 people. Not a problem at all. So currently, a house with more than 3 unrelated persons in zone R4A must apply and be approved as a special use to be a lodging establishment. A lodging establishment license must be reapplied for annually. Lodging establishments must have a manager and are supposed to have regular inspections, is my understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because this isn't really common knowledge among most people, and I gleaned what I could from the documentation. I have more detail about how they would solve this problem. I don't know if you want me to keep going, but it does seem to solve a lot of the problems here. And I don't know if you've had any discussion about it in the past. If we are going to have another opportunity to talk about it, or as Gail was suggesting, a general meeting for discussion, I could bring my points to that later meeting.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to, because there are a lot of people on this call who would like to.
Okay, I will stop, but could I ask if you would please consider lodging establishments?
I think I can defer to staff, but I think we
can look into that.
All right.
Okay, and then I've got one person's hand raised, and then we really do need to figure out next steps. John Leisinger?
Yeah, thanks. 2004 Orrington, Ward 1. Appreciate the time. So first, I don't think anybody on this call is trying to stop Evanston's quest of improving affordable housing. And as a macro issue for the city, that's certainly admirable, and we're all for it. And in Ward 1, we have a mixed income tower going up. It's 2 blocks from my house. Couldn't be happier. The issue is we have a micro Ward 1 issue, which is students, pure and simple. And to the woman from Connections for the Homeless, I wish you could move some of your clients into the student housing that we have, because there's no doubt in my mind it would be better received. But we're talking about the zoning commission being an arm of enforcement. That's not what we're trying to do. We're talking about incentives. And when you have an incentive like the brothel on the books, investors have to think twice about making $1 million or high 6-figure investments in something that is technically breaking the law. So while, yes, some people choose to make that investment and don't worry about it, it does stop a rush on our neighborhood for others. And if you think this is creating affordable housing, you're nuts, because they're $1,000 bedrooms. You're not increasing the diversity of the neighborhood. You're risking the Northeast Historic District, and for what? To cater to out-of-town landlords students and a university that wants us to subsidize their students with our home values. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to now defer to the other members of the commission and Megan. Obviously, I think we need to have an additional meeting scheduled to continue this discussion. I don't think we're close to being in a position to bring in the full commission, although I will certainly defer to my other commissioners for their input. But I think that we need to find a time where this can be the only subject on the agenda, and that we can't have another meeting scheduled to happen immediately after it. So, commissioners and Megan, what are our options here?
Well, we actually do not at this point have anything for the second April Plan Commission meeting, which would be the 28th. So if the committee wanted to, we could do a meeting on that date. Otherwise, it would be a matter of choosing a date that commissioners were available. And that is a little bit more open, because at this point, I'm not positive what is on the agenda for the future Plan Commission meeting. So that there might be something on the agenda and it might not be.
All right, so April 28th would be an opportunity for a committee meeting?
At this point, yeah, because we don't have anything
Okay.
at this point on the schedule for that meeting.
Commissioner Westerberg, are you available?
Yes, let's put it.
And Commissioner Isaac, are you still going to be on the commission at that point?
He actually will not be.
Oh,
Oh,
but we could, you know, we could invite the rest of the commission to attend the meeting
it's
as
open.
well. Well, I'm open to that. 7 p.m. Does that work? Or would you prefer an earlier
we
time?
could do 6.
6?
And start at the same time that we usually do.
6, yeah, 6 p.m. Does that work for Commissioner Westerberg? I guess you and I are I think you might be muted, Chris.
no. I'm just thinking of missing Commissioner Isaac. That's all. I'm just heartbroken. So.
You can come. You're more than welcome.
Absolutely.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
All right, well, then let's do that. And may I have, I guess, a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
I second.
Okay,
I think we can do
Just
a
do
voice
that?
vote for that one.
okay, all in favor, aye.
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 And I would like to encourage all of the members of the public who are on the call to, come with your comments and promise we'll have more time for a dialogue at that meeting.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.